Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. If you are here for the first time, welcome. If you're a returning listener, I am so pleased you've come back and chosen to spend your time listening to this podcast. So this is a podcast where we are looking to thrive, not just survive, expand our perception of what's possible, and create a curious, creative, and connected community. On today's episode, I'll be having a pretty informal but incredibly informative chat with Dr. Lorne Brown from Acubalance. And this is a two-part series. Part one is this week, part two will be next week. I hope you can listen to both. And we have a pretty hilarious start to the conversation. I thought that he thought that we were going to just record and go for it. And he thought that we were having a pre-chat. So Lorne is the clinical director for Acubalance, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor, the founder of the world's first integrative fertility symposium, a podcast host, a sought-after speaker, and much, much more. And I don't think that I would be having the life I'm living today if it wasn't for this man. Many of my miles on my Miles to Zen journey have been traveled weaving in and out of Lorne's and his colleagues at Acubalance's work. So let's jump in. Welcome, Lorne. So nice to have you on the podcast. I feel I should be saying, be more official and say, welcome, Dr. Brown, but we go back quite a ways. So I think I'm in Lorne status now.
I think so. I think most people get the Lorne status anyhow, but yes, I appreciate that. We've known each other that far back. We got history.
We do. So I'm thrilled to be talking to you today on our Miles to Zen podcast, because you have certainly been part of my journey. So welcome.
Hey, thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it. And your listeners should know this is really spontaneous what we're doing, right? I'm even blurring my background because we're doing renos. And so we weren't even planning to record, but that's how you and I like to roll sometimes. So I didn't even change, I didn't put on a cleaner shirt. Still got renovation mess in the back. But hey, this is what we call grassroots spontaneous. Let's see what happens. I had to turn off the camera because of the blur. I need to keep it a mystery whether I'm wearing pants or not. All right.
Oh, that's funny.
Let's just see how things unfold, right?
Yes. Exactly. So I wanted to just bring everyone back to when we first met. It was 2009. I was pregnant for the third time and, a bit worried that I'd lost the two other pregnancies, a bit worried about how this was going to go. And I had a friend say, oh, when I was pregnant, my son was breech. And I went and saw this Chinese medicine guy, and he helped turn the baby around. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll give that a shot. And so I enter in the fall of 2009 and get an appointment and met you. And you took one look at me and said, you have a thyroid problem. And that was the beginning of our relationship.
Well, and I can't because it's 2025 now. So I would have been 9 years in practice in 2009. And I've changed it because I usually would never look at somebody and just volunteer stuff. I would definitely take my time. But I think it was after a little bit of a history taking that I kind of sensed that you had a thyroid problem.
Yes,
versus
I'm
you
sure.
walk in the room and ooh, you have a thyroid problem. I'm not one of those I'm not that talented that I could do that.
Well, it's a long time ago. My memories have condensed. But what was particularly interesting was that my doctor at the time had tested me for thyroid issues, and I was totally fine. But as soon as I got pregnant, my thyroid went through the roof. So I wasn't fine and ended up not keeping that pregnancy, but then went on a journey of terrible, terrible herbs and acupuncture and some great sessions. And we'll talk about this more, but as Lorne calls, prepping the garden. And 3 months later,
right on time. First time of trying again. I was pregnant, great pregnancy. 9 months later, I have a beautiful baby boy.
Yeah, it was no longer a baby anymore.
No, my baby is 6'2" and he's 14.
Yes. So yeah, so nourish the soil. And what we would share back then is it's a Chinese proverb is, when you're preparing to conceive, whether you've had a history of miscarriages, whether you've had infertility issues, or whether you're just trying to have a healthy baby, give yourself at least 100 days, like 3 to 4 cycles. And so you did that. And you talked about your thyroid, where it was normal. In the West, often we just look at the TSH and that can look normal. And at our clinic, we do a little bit of a deeper dive, free T3, T4, and antibodies, which we sometimes find stuff. In your case, as you shared, we can talk, it's kind of subclinical. Your thyroid is kind of in range, like it's not outside, but it's not in the optimal range. And you have all these symptoms. So we're less concerned about what your blood tests are like, and we're more pay attention to the signs in your body, what's showing health or not. And then yes, those foul tasting herbs, they are bitter and they can be very bitter. But as you know, you have a 14-year-old as of this recording who's 6'2", well worth it, right? When it works to drink those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they taste better now because as you know, our journey has continued. My husband comes to visit you sometimes. I am in and out for various things that I want to work on that we'll talk about. And the herbs, in my experience, ranged from cinnamon soap being the most delicious to a couple-year-old dead skunk diarrhea, which were by far the worst. I don't think you do those ones anymore. I think those ones have improved. I don't
Yeah,
think those would have been a crowd pleaser.
I've learned to read my audience and ease them into it. It does take 3 to 4 days for the tongue to change. And as you share this, I'm just thinking how parallel our journey is, because back in those days, I was very physical, like material body focused, right? And as you know, I do a lot of conscious work, energy psychology, and I know you've had that journey too, and incorporate that into our practice. And going to how, where you came from the corporate world, like I'm a chartered accountant, a CPA, like just how geeky grounded we were. And then some people would say we're not so grounded anymore.
So that is so great because I actually wanted to bring everyone back to your journey of how you got into Chinese medicine in the first place, and then how your clinics evolved to where you are now. I know that's a ginormous journey. So maybe let's start how you got there in the first place.
Sure. Well, as you know, my clinic's Acubalance. We're in Vancouver, BC. And my journey started back in the late 80s, 90s. So I did a bachelor's, and this is not going to be a 25-year time taking the story. I'm going to condense this quickly. So I did a Bachelor of Science at Western, and then I did my graduate at accounting in McGill. And while I was living in Montreal, I had health issues. Again, this is the late 80s, now early 90s when I was at McGill. It was 1990. And so the alternative medicine, especially on the East Coast, wasn't very popular. And things like we know about now, like chronic fatigue or candida, that wasn't really as well known either, or chronic systemic inflammation. And so I did the Western route and, scoped every orifice, couldn't really find out what was going on. And I was struggling, a lot of brain fog, a lot of fatigue, a lot of digestive issues, going through many different types of healing or alternative medicine practitioners. And it was the Chinese medicine doctor that had the biggest transformation. And because I didn't know where to go, because it wasn't something on my radar, I was living in Montreal. My aunt was really into this stuff. And she heard how I was struggling. So she'd always talk, we would call her the woo-woo aunt. And so she'd always talk about her healers, her guides. And so finally, remember, Bachelor of Science to accounting, right? I was a little bit not. So I was open, but I wasn't immersed in it. And so I flew out to Calgary to see her Chinese medicine herbalist because I didn't know where to go for this. And they changed my diet, gave me a lot of Chinese herbal medicine to take. And through diet and herbal changes, I had a dramatic shift in my physical health. Like I'm talking peak physicality. And it took months, to a year for this shift to happen. But I remember the clarity, because I used to have such brain fog, the clarity that I had while in class, doing my chartered accountancy training program and doing my graduate diploma in accounting. I remember just sitting there and noticing I didn't need to take notes. Everything they said just made sense, and it felt like it was just being remembered, right? I just knew it.
That's it. I'm going on herbs again.
Yeah. So fast forward. Now I use my low level laser therapy in my brain and my nerve visor. So fast forward, I go on and off the food and the supplements, and I would kind of slide back into not feeling well. So then I really stuck with it. And I kind of hit my peak, feeling great physically. And I finally reached out to a healer, some form of energy healing. I don't really know what the individual did. Maybe it was polarity therapy, they called it. I can't remember exactly. I had gone through colonics. I did all the physical. Oh, and a side note, I had a fear of needles. So when I had my first acupuncture session, I passed out.
That is
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. I was fear of needles, and I was being brave guy, we're sitting up. This individual, the practitioner, how you always lay down. I
Yeah.
literally lay down. He had me sitting up on his table when he put the needles in. He goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I go, "Great." So, and I've obviously overcome my fear of needles, because not only can I receive them, but I can give them, right?
A lot.
Yes, a lot. So yes, I get those who have a fear of needles, because I was one of those people. So I reached a peak level of, I would say, physical health. Like I could not get my heart rate to, I could go high, but couldn't get it super high. Like I just felt physically the best shape of my life, mental clarity, and something was still missing. And in one of these energy sessions, every time they would do this energy work, and I did several sessions, I would want to stay totally conscious and alert. But as soon as they kind of put their hands over me, I would just get really drowsy, and I would drift for their hour session. It was just bizarre for me. Like, what is happening? And this individual, and I don't remember the healer's name from Montreal, but had shared that maybe I want to get more into the spiritual part of healing, because you're doing the diet, the exercise, the supplements, you're clean. But there's a whole other vibrational level that you may want to tap into. And so they shared a book with me, and that was my entry into understanding the energy and vibration of medicine. While I was studying and working as an accountant in Montreal at a chartered accountancy firm, I would take sometimes a night course, and the night course would be on a Chinese medicine herbal course or dietary course, and on lifestyle, on Donnie Eden's energy work. Like there's just all these little classes, and it was me in my late 20s in a suit and with women age 40 to 65. It was always in the group. I was usually the sole guy with much older women in the group. And it is funny because I ended up focusing on women's health. And that was never my plan. When I got into Chinese medicine, when I finally had the courage to leave my comfortable, secure work, and I left accounting. I was an auditor for an accounting firm when I moved to Vancouver. I moved to Vancouver thinking I'm going to do some form of alternative medicine. I needed to leave Montreal. I had family there, and the East Coast mentality wasn't open enough. So I didn't have the confidence, or I didn't think I had the ability to make that career change with the environment of the pressure from family and friends, because it wasn't very open to that in the East Coast, Montreal. So I moved to Vancouver, and I just didn't have the guts to do it. So I went and found an accounting job again. So working in accounting, taking courses out of interest, getting treatment for myself. And then I leave that job and get a job with the Ocean Spray Growers here. So I was their controller and doing some tax work with them and some other projects. Got to work on the farm a little bit. And then eventually I decided to go back and study Chinese medicine. So that's kind of how I got to this journey. But when I got into Chinese medicine and opened my practice in 2000, I thought I would focus on gut health, because that's kind of what got me there: chronic fatigue and severe digestive issues. So that was my focus. And most people that come to health practitioners back in 2000 and still in 2025 are women. Yeah. Women seek out health much sooner than men would, right? It's a generalization, but it's just a generalization me and my colleagues do experience, unless they have a strong partner like yourself that says you're going. they don't usually go, right? Like when a guy shows up in my office, I say, what brings you here? Why are you here to see me? And they say, my wife told me, right? That's usually their answer. But
Well, that's how it started for Richard in 2009.
yeah, that's how they come. So I'll wrap this up that how I got into the fertility, and now we do so much perimenopause and menopause. And my practice, I just anything on the conscious level, helping people work on that level is my passion, is my joy. But when I would work with somebody, because Chinese medicine is holistic, they were coming in because of IBS or Crohn's or colitis, some type of gut health, severe bloating. And we do a history, and we always look at women at their menstrual history. It tells us a lot of information. And so they would have either PMS or menstrual pain or other things going on with their cycle. And when we treat, although they came in for the digestive issues, we treat holistically. So the treatment that's helping, the pattern that's causing all the digestive upset is also the same imbalance as causing the PMS acne or the PMS irritability or the night sweats, and the pain with the cycle. So when we address it with herbs, diet, acupuncture, their gut health improved, but their cycles got better. So over a short period of time, like in a year or two, I started becoming known as the PMS guy because I was helping a lot of people with PMS. And I even, Common Ground was the magazine. I don't know if it's still available now, but it was
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, it was
Maybe.
pre-internet. That's where all
Yeah.
the alternative practitioners would advertise. So I would advertise women's health because my practice became women's health. I mean, I think I was almost a bit of an empath. I swear, I'd be treating women, and then all of a sudden, I start to think I had PMS, right? And I worked with women, and women would sometimes, my women colleagues would tease me that I was like premenstrual. Like they said, every once in a while, you seem like you're really vulnerable or sensitive, or and and acne. Like I would feel like I was taking on whatever my patients were getting, right? Even one time I woke up with hives. I had a woman that came in, she was so histamine, she had hives. And the next day I had hives. I was like, holy crap, this is a shamanistic style that I did not sign up for, you know? So how I got into the fertility is somebody found me in the Common Ground where it said women's health. Nobody in my profession in 2002 had a focus on reproductive health, fertility. And it makes sense because in Chinese medicine, infertility is a miscellaneous disorder. It doesn't even get its own chapter in the gynecology text, right? So just wasn't something that we were focusing on. So she tried to find somebody who's doing fertility because she had found Randine Lewis, who's in Houston, who wrote the book, The Infertility Cure, and was well known for fertility. And she flew out to see Randine. And Randine said, you need to find somebody that you can go at least once or twice a week for acupuncture and do herbal medicine. So there was nobody saying they did fertility, but at least I said women's health. She came to my clinic in 2001-ish, late 2001, early 2002, this woman, and said, I need some help. I'm going through an IVF cycle and you do women's health. Do you think you can help me? And I said, well, I have a first question I have to ask you is what is IVF? So I hadn't seen anything in IVF. I was always
I'm sure
honest.
that filled her with confidence.
Yeah. Phil, well, not too many people say I don't know. So I do think she was a little like what, but also here's why she wasn't concerned. Because it actually gave her confidence to ask the second part. She said the second part was because now she realized I knew nothing from that perspective. She said, I would like you to follow Randine's advice. I would like you to communicate with her because she's agreed to, and she'll tell you where to do the acupuncture. She'll tell you what herbal medicine to do to prepare me for the IVF, during the IVF, and after the IVF. And I literally said to her, so let me get this straight. You want this Randine Lewis, who's been in practice for many years, who treats fertility and knows a lot about IVF, to tell me what points to put in you, to tell me what herbs to prescribe to you. So basically be like a monkey and just do what Randine says. And I have no responsibility to the outcome, but I get to learn from this master Randine. She goes, yes. I go, I think that's the best idea ever. Like I get to learn and not have the responsibility. And Randine, I became her first one-on-one student that she mentored. She does lots of group mentors. We're great friends, but that's how that relationship happened. And that's
amazing.
I got into fertility.
Wow, I didn't know about that part. Yeah, because as a new patient coming in 2009, I wasn't getting much of your backstory. Now, for anyone who wants some of their backstory, here it is. You're welcome.
I'd already been in practice for 9 years, 7 years doing fertility,
Yeah.
because by 2004, I would only take on reproductive health patients because my practice was so busy. I couldn't take on other things because I wanted to help all those that were having fertility and miscarriage challenges. And then eventually I added associates in 2004. As you know, I have lots of associates, and I created a continuing education company in 2009. So when you came, that was when 2005 it was in person, went online 2009, Prodi, now known as Healthy Seminars. I don't teach in it, but I own the platform and bring in these amazing healers that educate naturopaths, acupuncturists, and functional medicine practitioners, which I learn from and my team learns from. And so that's kind of how it all kind of came about. And I really feel I was guided to kind of tie into kind of some the samey with us is when I look back, I remember just the awareness and knowing that while things were changing, like my health issue that I had, so grateful for the chronic fatigue, the brain fog, the all the digestive stuff, and there's so much more I could share, but gross, so I won't share that. I love my life and I love what I'm doing. And if I didn't have that situation, then I would never have my path change. And just as things were changing in my life, there was always kind of like that whisper in my ear that was just okay in the moment and knew that just sit back, like this is happening for a reason, that like I can look back now and understand so much was happening for me, not happening to me.
Mm.
Right. And so everything, like just how the synchronicities lined up and just being open, like when that woman came to me and said, help me with this IVF, listen to whatever Randine says, I was open to it, right? And being able to say, I don't know, like what's IVF, right? And as my patients know, I'll go dig and learn. Even a month or two ago, 3 months ago, I was asked to help somebody with ALS, which I don't see. And it was as a favor, please help my friend with ALS. So fine, you're going to make me think and really work here because I've been 25 years in practice. I don't have to think that hard when I see women's health stuff. I think, but not that hard. And I went and dug and learned and did a few things. And lo and behold, we were able to help with spasming right in the hands really well. So that was the whole idea of always opening, always ready and willing to learn, always ready, willing to learn, and knowing that you'll never arrive. You never know enough.
Yeah, that's why you're perfect on this podcast, Miles to Zen.
Miles to Zen.
It's really celebrating this beautifully messy journey of ours. So when did you start really getting into, I guess, the mind body stuff? You introduced me to Joe Dispenza, and I'm trying to remember when that was. But then you were exploring a whole bunch of different people at the time.
Well, I'll tell you why I got into it is, again, just like that healer that I met when I was studying accounting, it's kind of like the right timing. Here's a book, and it's time to take it to another level, vibrational level versus the material level, quantum versus Newtonian, right? So I remember that Chinese medicine totally understands the mind-body connection. Like that's the medicine. You can't separate the two. But we're kind of trained in TCM, Chinese medicine, around the world, kind of post-cultural revolution in China. And so they kind of took the spirit out of it. So we know how important it is, but kind of how we treat stuff really wasn't there. And I really knew I was missing that on some level. So I went to add to my skill set by being trained as a clinical hypnotherapist. And just through this process and learning, I just kept on coming across other tools and modalities, other forms of energy psychology, Psych K, Marissa Peer's rapid transformational therapy, Bell Bankston's healing. I just started learning and doing more and learning and doing more. And it was because the Chinese medicine, neuro-linguistic programming, the Chinese medicine gets it, right? And we call this psychoneuroimmunology now in the West, right? Your thoughts and feelings affect your nervous system, your immune system, your endocrine system, right? So it's all connected. And I was just looking for processes and tools that I could bring into the treatment room. And through my healthy seminars, I have found teachers and practitioners that actually have the classical approach that I've learned and my team learned, so we can bring that with our herbs and needles, so we can be addressing that, because it wasn't lost, it just was stopped being taught, that kind of approach. So I don't know why there was something always pushing me. I mean, I can say this because one of the guests on my Conscious Fertility podcast, Neil Theist, he's a liver pathologist. He's a medical doctor, liver pathologist, and he has a shaman, right? So if medical doctor, liver pathologist can have a shaman, I can tell you that when I was studying in Montreal, I befriended a shaman as well. And so I had that teaching too. So I used to go at least once a week and learn from this shaman, and we became really good friends with the whole family. She's married, has kids, and so I always had that. And she had shared kind of when I went to Chinese medicine. This is what's really, it's just I'm remembering this now. When I moved to Montreal, and I had shared with her that I'm going to leave my accounting job and do Chinese medicine. She said, "That's not what you're going to do. That's not your long-term future." And we had this little discussion, and it was really about I'm going to be a mind doctor and work on cells, like on a cellular level. You're going to be healing on a cellular level. And at that time, I had just started training in NLP out of interest. So I knew the mind was there, and I didn't know why, but I said, "You're right. Chinese medicine is not what I'm going to be doing, but it is one of the stones that is being put forward as part of my journey. So I need it now, but I won't be probably practicing like a full-on Chinese medicine doctor." Now, I am practicing. I do have a Chinese medicine practice. That's what I'm doing. But as you know, the things that I bring into my practice, the energy work, the clinical hypnotherapy, and what I call conscious work now, um, is really where I think that's where my focus is. That's what I enjoy. And I think that's what's giving the people I see the greatest benefit as well. Because we're working on that quantum level, we're on that program. Your subconscious programs filter down into your conscious and into your body. And this is where we have so many of our health issues, lack of abundance. This is where the world becomes an external reflection of our internal reflection. And then it all comes down to that if you can heal yourself, then your whole family constellation heals. And I see this with people I see when I work with, a female woman, she sees her children and her partner benefit, vice versa. When I work with the guy, his wife, changes because you're like Wi-Fi when you heal on the inside. So I call it kind of, it's, if I gave it a name, it's quantum healing, right? I don't know. You're doing the healing. I'm just doing the facilitation. And then the needles are great to help move some blood and circulation and help get you to sympathetic into parasympathetic. And as you know, I brought in some new toys, the neurovisor and the vibroacoustic sound table. Last week I was at a conference and there's a whole section on sound and talking about all the frequencies, which my table does. And so I was like, there's the synchronicities, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just felt like I wanted to lie on this table. And then I go to a course and I learn all the crazy good stuff, research on vibration and sound and how it affects the cells, and we heal from that. So
Yeah, well, I know when you introduced me to the Joe Dispenza work, and you basically said, there's a lot of people doing the same work, but it's just packaged in different ways. And at that time, I really resonated with Joe Dispenza's stuff, and so I read his books, and I had some health challenges, and was really in my head over them. And I did those meditations a lot. And I think then, fast forward to 2018, when I like to say I had my breakdown, I mean, spiritual awakening, I had
there's
that.
a saying, right? Break down to break through, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. That's what happened. And the nice thing was that when that happened, I'd already had this foundation of working with you on that energy work, as well as reading Joe Dispenza's stuff and doing his meditations. So it was like I had this launch pad to kind of then go into that next level of, let's say, consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing that happened there was I refused to see myself as a victim any longer in that circumstance. And it was, this is happening for me, not to me. And that helped me get out of my head.
And there's stages that have been documented of awakening. And the lowest stage, the first stage, is you're a victim, right? So once you go from victim to the next stage, where it's happening for you, and there's some accountability, responsibility, and it goes up and up on this awakening process, which, people have documented this for centuries, sages, right? Thousands of years, but even more so in some of our common era books. You've experienced it, right? And it accelerates, because most
Yeah.
people are living on the victim, and suffering wakes us up. So there is we said breakdown to breakthrough. So if you look today, there's a breakdown, right? And suffering tends to move us to awakening. And if you have some tools, then you can have a softer landing. And
Oh, it's true. And I know that then I just started reading every book I possibly could. I started listening to podcasts. I started really, really absorbing the different things. And I think it was around that time. Yeah, it was around that time you had started experimenting with these teaching workshops that I
oh
came
yeah,
to.
yeah. I
And
started doing unconsciousness. I started doing talks on those. Yes, pre-COVID.
yeah. And I remember meeting a woman there, and we ended up going for coffee a little while later. And I told her I was looking for a Joe Dispenza book club. I was ready to go all in. And
Right.
she said, well, I don't know about a book club, but I have a spirit night tomorrow night that I'm going to. And we're doing a Joe Dispenza meditation
There's
and
some.
talking about his book.
Yeah.
So I was like, wow, did that work fast?
And
The
we
quantum is quick.
and we were talking about manifestation, weren't we, at the workshops? Because that was part of it. So there you go. Look, there
Yeah,
you
it
go.
was. Soda always likes to come in. Soda Pop is my black cat. He likes to come in when things get juicy. So then, where did you end up going from that?
And that was my last Joe Dispenza workshop to this date was February of 2020. I think it was in Sacramento, just when they were talking about COVID. A few people showed up at the retreat in mask, and then March the world shut down. Right, that was my last.
Right, you helped bring COVID back into Canada. I was
Yeah,
visiting LA. I
that's
helped.
right.
I went to my first and only Oprah conference, and I helped bring it back in too, I think.
Well, I didn't. Luckily, I did not have get sick for many months, so I don't know if I brought it back. But
Oh, I did.
I did you? I did not, no, I did not have it. I did treat a good friend that came back sick with, and it wasn't until later hindsight because they didn't even have the test yet that we thought she had COVID. But to answer your question, I'll tell you what I'm remembering now, because when you do this work, I will share that when you do this work, things change. Your brain wiring changes. If we can see that the brain structure changes. I mean, there's research on this in the hippocampus. So how you remember things are a little different. So from today, I'll kind of give you what I can remember, right? Because I'm very aware that my personality has changed from what it was 10, 15 years ago. I'm still me, but there are things that have changed so much so, like things that used to trigger me when these things happen, I can still recognize I don't like it. Like I can have that thought, but there's no visceral, there's no emotion, there's nothing in my body. Like it feels nothing.
Yeah, that is so amazing. You're telling me about like certain dinners that you would have to go to. And and there'd be people at these dinners who used to trigger you. And then you got to the point where you looked forward to it just so you could practice.
Well, and that's what the workshops I did to let you know I'm a very selfish human being. I always people say you're generous, look what you're doing. Like my healthy seminars, people like what you're sharing with the profession, the colleagues. I mean, I want to learn. So I basically find these people, I learn, and I just share it with people. Like it's all, I'm still doing it for me. And when I did the workshops, I'm a kinesthetic learner. So some people read and learn. I go and train in it and learn it. So I became a clinical hypnotherapist, right? I went and did the program, and then I would treat people just with clinical hypnotherapy. Or when I did Psyche, I just treated people with Psyche for a while. Now I integrate everything into my treatment. I never know what tool I'm going to pull out, but that's how I learn. So when I did these workshops, when you're inspired, there's a natural that you want to share. So that kind of happens. But there's that thing in medical school that says, see one, do one, teach one, right? And so when you really want to master it or make it kind of part of your DNA, if you can teach it, if you can explain it, then you start to own it. And so I had saw it, I went and learned. There's a see it, do it. I was using it in my practice. And then the next level is, can I teach it? So that's where the workshops came in, right? I wanted to share. I loved it. It filled me up. And it also helped me take my understanding to another level. But you can read all the self-help books in the world and still not be enlightened, right? But you can become enlightened from an unenlightened master. So I was kind of one of those people early on where I could say anything, teach it. I could talk the talk, but I wasn't necessarily walking the talk. And so it wasn't until I started really doing the process work that went with it. And there's an expression, the value is not in the knowledge, the value is in the application of the knowledge. And I don't know when or how I got this. People in our circle, they'll say, got the download, but the inspiration came through me. And it became very obvious from the multiple books. And I'm an avid listener, to be honest. I listen to books. I listen to a couple a month, 12 months a year, right? So I have a nice book list that I listen sometimes more than once. I do workshops. I was just in San Diego with Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, a bunch of other people. I'm surround myself with that. My podcast listening when I do my walks and drive are always on this kind of stuff, usually, right? One day it just came to me that they're all doing the same thing. It came very obvious. Some have 20 steps, some have 2 steps, whatever, but it became very obvious of how this process works, which I've shared with you. I call it the notice, accept, choose again, right?
Yeah.
You have to notice. If you got to make the unconscious conscious. Otherwise, you're at the effect.
No idea how many times I use that in corporate meetings.
There you go. Notice. Everything's neutral. I won't go into that unless we'll talk about it later, but there's this notice, accepts the key, being able to surrender, and then choose again, right? How do you want to be in this world? And it just became obvious to me that it's a process. So it just gives you some structured process to stay awake, because it's so easy to fall into your wound and be triggered and go into high beta, go into the reptilian brain, and now you're in survival mode, versus whole brain where you're present, awake, where you can, as we say, you can either unconsciously, habitually react, which is what happens to most of us. We get triggered, we go into our wounds, or you can consciously choose to respond. But you can only consciously choose to respond if you're resourced and are awake in that moment. And so it became obvious that this notice, accept, choose is what everybody's doing. And then I realized all these tools I've learned can fit into the notice or into the accept, choose again. And so that's what I do. And I believe what's happening through interviewing the people I've interviewed and through my personal experience. If you want to share, we can go out there and I can tell you some things that happened to me when I was 11, 20 that it doesn't make sense. But through that process experience, what I think is happening is you're tuning into your higher self. You're becoming present. And when you're present, the resistance drops, because when resistance is up, it's stuck energy. We call it chi stagnation in Chinese medicine. In the West, we call it stress. And it doesn't feel good. But when resistance drops in Chinese medicine, we call it chi flow. You now have flow and receptivity. By the way, this is important for fertility, but it's important for abundance, attracting what you want, life, health, etc. When you have flow and receptivity, then inspired thought will come through you. And I believe it's coming through a higher consciousness, your higher self. It's not coming through the ego side of yourself. It's a felt experience work versus a thought experience. And when you act on that, usually good things come from that. And regardless, you can be at peace, which is what everybody wants. Everybody wants to feel happy. And people come to me because they have relationship issues, because they have terrible hot sweats, night sweats, because they want a baby. When you distill it down, everybody wants to be happy. So you can still be at peace in an unhappy situation when you're present. And so this just kind of came to me. And then it was for me, because I was struggling. I'm treating people, working with people. I got a good life externally, but I was always having this low level anxiety. And sometimes it was really intense anxiety. I was living with it and I didn't medicate it. And it was interesting. Most people I would see in my practice were on some form of antidepressant. Even the psychologists I see and the medical doctors are all on meds. And I never did that, just because what I do, I just felt like, for me, I'm not saying it's not for other people, for me. And also I was always curious, where's this coming from? And I didn't want to numb it out, because I wanted to see if I could get to the root cause and clean it up. And I did, by the way, because I don't have that low level anxiety. But it was that anxiety and then debilitating anxiety that brought me to really need to do this work. So again, being the selfish guy that I am, I learned this stuff because I didn't want to suffer anymore. And it's always been, when I find something that kind of works for me and I can understand it, I do like to share it. So I do like to share things, but it was for me selfishly. I was like, my wife's not going to stick around with this guy. Like, and I go, my kids can't be raised with this guy. Like, I got to end this, right? I got to end this this program that I don't know how many generations we have. So that's kind of, it's everything. Like I just was doing everything. And then one day it clicked. And if I didn't do all these different things, it would not have clicked. And when I think hindsight, I remember having these glimpses of spirituality, consciousness that you can't really explain when I was 11, and then again in my 20s. And when I was doing hypnosis, I had stuff that was unexplainable. And only with my Conscious Fertility podcast, when I brought on some of these physicists and PhDs, psychologists, to talk and teachers of consciousness, they were explaining things. I'm like, I had that, I know what they're talking about. So it's not only I had the knowledge, but I've had this experience. And so I've always been a seeker for this stuff. So there's something inside me that has always been seeking this. And to wrap that part of the story up, I remember when I left accounting to be into Chinese medicine, they were like, just choose a job already. Like, my like 20s, my parents were like, choose a job. And my mom was like, when are you going to stop seeking? Like, you're such a seeker. Like, what are you looking for? And I was looking for my higher self. I was looking for happiness, and I couldn't get in the outside. I didn't know couldn't communicate it when I was in my 20s or my 30s or my 40s. I'm in my later part of my 50s now. I couldn't communicate it, but I wanted to be happy, just like every one of your listeners and everybody that wants to come into my practice. They just think, if I just got healed of this, I'll be happy. If I just got this relationship, I'd be happy. If I just made this much money, I'd be happy. If my partner was just this way, I'd be happy. But we all know once you get over 40 that nothing you get on the outside is permanent. It's only temporary. But that inner happiness, where you can be at peace in unhappy situations, so it doesn't matter what's going on in the external world, there's still that low level peace, happiness. That's tuning into your higher self. So what I realize now at this age, that I was looking to tune into something greater than my physical, something that I can't even give words to, but I've learned that thousands of years ago, the sages have named it, talked about it. They talk about it in modern day stuff, consciousness, higher self. And not only do I have the knowledge, because I read and I've taken programs, so I'm trained in it, not just as a lay reader, but I've had personal experiences, and I've been able to facilitate other people with their experiences. And so now it's no longer a desperate, I need to fix this, because that's how I was. And that's what a lot of my patients are like, fix this. Now I'm enjoying the journey. There is no destination I'm concerned about. Like now it's kind of more surrender than needing and wanting, and just more, the more I can practice the surrender and let go, and it's a process, it's a discipline, it's a skill to do this, the more resources seem to flow to me. And if they don't, I'm okay too, but it just seems to work that way.
Do you know what's really interesting? You talk about this seeking, and I can really relate with that because, I used to buy all the books, what color is your parachute? I could do anything if only I knew what it was. It feels very much about this seeking to find your purpose. And the way you describe it and the way I was seeking to find my purpose seems so aligned. And yet in this journey of yours, you've ultimately found your purpose, and that's evolved. And even though you say it's selfish, the result is of service, which is interesting.
Well, can I talk on that? Because, selfish has a bad rap, right? So I often use the word in my workshops, I call it selfful or soulful, just to give it a different word. And you do have to be selfish. Healer has to heal thyself. You got to fill your basket.
Oxygen mask on first.
Yeah. And when you fill your basket, you naturally will want to share it with others. So that's just the good part. And that is kind of the secret that we'll learn, is when you're of service to others, it just fills you up. So, but there is this part, if you're doing service for others, so they'll like you and so you'll get something in return, that doesn't work. I mean, it may work on the material level for a while, but it doesn't work. Like inside, these people are still suffering. They're suffering from shame and guilt because they know what's really in their hearts. So because it's about balance. You can become so self-absorbed, selfish that it has a very it's not good either, right? This was about like, I got to heal. I got to fix this. Like I'm done. Like I'm done living this way, right? I got to fix this. Yeah. And it was like, I go like, my wife doesn't deserve to be with this guy. My children can't be raised with this guy. I got to fix this. I want to be, this is the father I want to be. This is the spouse I want to be. But more importantly, this is who I want to be, and just tap into that. Right. And so that's what this was about, is like when you say seeking, it is a form of selfishness, but in a healthy, positive way. So if you like, we can use a different word, selfful, soulful. And it's been my experience, and they write about this, that when you're filled up, or what's that woman, she channels Abraham Hicks, she calls it
Yeah.
tapped in, tuned in, I think. You just want
Tapped in, tuned in, turned on.
tapped in, turned on. Yeah. Tapped in, turned on. You just want to share.
Yeah.
You get excited, you want to share, but you in a balanced way too, where it's not like you got to learn this, you got to believe in what I believe. And, like as if we've talked when you're introduced to this, and when I see mostly women in my practice, I do see men, but still predominantly women. They go, I want my husband to do this. I'm like, oh, don't. You be the example. You do this, and then he won't need to do this. And if he asks you, hey, you've changed, what are you doing? Then tell him. But don't try to say you need to do this, because that's the ego's game. You've taken yourself off of you, and now you're like, I'm going to fix him. If you heal and you do your thing, your Wi-Fi changes, and these other people will start to shift naturally anyhow, or they'll ask you, what are you doing? I want some of it. Right?
Oh, it's so tempting though to fix your partner.
Yes. Well, but then you're
Especially when you're avoiding fixing yourself. Then
that's what you're
they're
doing.
like,
That's what you're doing. So as soon as you're
yeah.
trying to fix the other, you are now out of the work, and you are back into the material Newtonian world, where you think people are separate and cause and effect. And now you're in victim mode, and you're blaming other on either conscious or unconsciously. And conscious work, you realize you can be kind and firm. You're not like this jellyfish. You're not like this passive doormat either. Like, you just know who you are, and you can ask for what you want and speak your truth. And speaking your truth isn't speaking your mind. But yeah, as soon as you try to fix the other, then you're not conscious. I know that as soon as it's their fault, blaming them, that's my reminder. As soon as I notice that, to use the tools I have to go back in, and I'm in the resistance. I know what it feels like, chi stagnation. They need to change. I go in, I use my process. NAC is the process. I bring in some tools, and this feeling just metabolizes. There's an alchemy that happens. And if I can share this, is you're not doing it. It's not like conscious Lorne or conscious Shannon's doing this. I believe it's your higher self. And the metaphor I use is, if you choose to pick up an apple and eat it, that's you consciously picking it up. But once you bite the apple and chew, you're not consciously saying, okay, now salivary enzymes release. Now acid in my stomach release. Now intestines absorb the vitamins, or when you sleep at night and you're literally unconscious, you're not telling yourself to breathe, your heart to pump and circulate blood. That's your subconscious. That's your autonomic nervous system. That's another aspect of you. So when you do this work, when people say you're letting go, or these feelings and thoughts, as I say, get metabolized, it's like the apple. You have to give it awareness. So there's the notice, and use the tools to surrender. But that evaporation alchemy is not you. It just happens behind the scenes. Just like the apple gets digested, whether you're playing baseball, whether you're at the office, whether you're sleeping, it's happening. And so there is a bit of work or discipline required, but the magic, the alchemy, is beyond your physical ego. This is my interpretation, my experience, and that's how I explain it. So if you can just learn these tools, this process, the rest will just happen. Just like when you bite an apple, you don't think, I wonder if I'm going to digest this, or if this apple is going to kill me, right? You just trust you trust the process that digestion works, right?
Yeah, I remember coming to you because I had a certain body of work that I wanted to do. I was having some challenging relationships, and I'd bought Byron Katie's book, How to Do the Work. I had kept that book backwards on my bookshelf for 2 years. I had gone through all the other books, and for some reason, I just wasn't ready to do that book. And then finally, I was like, okay, I'm tired of being in this victim mode about this particular thing. I'm going to turn around the book, but I'm going to go get Lorne to help me walk through it. And which is essentially, a practitioner doing another version of the notice, accept,
Yeah,
change.
because her inquiry is NAC. As I said,
Yeah.
the NAC just one day realized this is what everybody's doing. So I think I tapped into something, that this is the process, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's doing
And that was so fundamental. That was such a fundamental shift for me. And I can, be a little stubborn sometimes, I think. an ex-boyfriend asked if I was determined or stubborn, and probably a healthy dose of both. If you can just explain that in Cole's notes again, just so people know the exercise. So because it's been such a profound tool for me to use, and I think for yourself and everybody, is just the simple exercise of the notice, accept, choose again, and what you need to do. Well, this is a perfect spot to leave off, because our next session, we can show people how to do the notice, choose again, or notice, accept, choose again.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this episode. This was fun. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Wasn't that a great conversation? Make sure you tune in next week for part 2 of the podcast. And if you'd like to contact Lorne or Acubalance, please be sure to see the notes below for all the details. And please follow, like, subscribe to the Miles to Zen podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen, so you're notified about upcoming episodes. And take a moment to leave a review. It really helps with the algorithms to help more people access these inspiring guests and stories. So thank you for listening, and see you next time.